Yeah, good morning, Fred. Today I want to discuss the unilateral ceasefire and the subsequent withdrawal of the Ethiopian National Defense Forces from Tigray in June this year. Now, viewers, we all know that the ENDF moved into Tigray in November 2020 and easily took Mekele by December. The TPLF retreated into hills, mountains, valleys and caves to hide and reorganize. And in January 2021, the TPLF launched a counteroffensive, and by June 2021, the government of Ethiopia declared a unilateral ceasefire and withdrew ENDF from Tigray. Why did this withdrawal happen? Now, we know nowadays that there's a lot of information across all media platforms. And therefore, the political consequences of civilian casualties in warfare have increased tremendously. Technology, satellite imaging and mapping have made it difficult for armies to hide atrocities. The political and strategic contexts are very important in any war. Ethiopia federal government had come under a lot of criticism, a barrage of well-orchestrated and funded media campaign, negative criticism, adverse reports by humanitarian agencies, all aimed at discrediting the efforts by the Ethiopian federal government to retake Tigray and exercise its power and authority over that region. Now, Ethiopia was also going through a general election in June this year. And therefore, to retain a measure of legitimacy in the eyes of the international community, which was also threatening sanctions against the government and certain people in government, the Ethiopian government was forced to withdraw, to declare a unilateral ceasefire and withdraw from Tigray. Now, this withdrawal was very hasty, and it did not conform to the battle tactics of a non-international armed conflict. Why? Because power does not entertain a vacuum. And immediately ENDF moved out of Tigray, TPLF quickly moved in, took control of state installations, but it also did not stop there. The TPLF reorganized their formations, consolidated their fronts, and advanced into a far region to try and reach the Ethiopia-Djibouti road and secure a supply corridor. They also moved into Amhara region to put pressure on federal government forces and Amhara militia who had seized western Tigray, where they still occupy. TPLF also moved into defensive positions and fortifications left behind by ENDF in Tigray. And in haste, during the withdrawal, ENDF also left behind vital logistical support installations, and this gave time to TPLF to reorganize. The unilateral ceasefire and subsequent withdrawal from Tigray was tactless. It was not done properly. It was not faced as it ought to happen, where armies are sent to combat insurgencies. Counter-insurgency operations require that any type of withdrawal from an area where an army was occupying, that the withdrawal is followed by the subsequent deployment of an occupying force, such as a police force or a paramilitary force. This did not happen in Tigray. And the politicians in Addis Ababa were simply fearing sanctions. Okay? They withdrew because of the sustained media campaign, which had projected federal forces as perpetrators of human rights abuses. The politicians were unable to manage the diplomatic fallout because of the adverse report. They abandoned ENDF and ordered a hasty withdrawal. This should never happen in any counter-insurgency operation in any country. Why? Because we saw very many ENDF soldiers being taken prisoner by TPLF at the time of the withdrawal. Because during the hasty withdrawal, TPLF was able to attack ENDF columns from the rear. They were also able to lay linear ambushes along the withdrawal or the line of advance for withdrawal. And they were able to attack in the ENDF columns, take equipment, and also capture fighters who are then taken as prisoners of war. My point is that war is the business of soldiers. Diplomacy and peace negotiations is the business of politicians. Politicians in Addis Ababa should stop worrying about the political cost of the war. They should not try to manage this war because that is not feasible. A war is either won or lost. It cannot be managed. It has never happened anywhere. Generals and field commanders in any war should be given the decisional autonomy and freedom of action to do that which they know best. The federal government politicians should not stop any volunteer who wants to join ENDF in the war. Volunteers should be accepted and should be trained and armed to support the efforts of the army, because in a war, every resource is required, and sometimes the human resource is the most important, and human resource of the people who know the territory where the combat is happening. It is the Amhara civilians in Wollo. It is the Afar civilians in Afar who know their territory well, and they should be allowed to join ENDF. They should be trained and they should be armed to support the efforts of the Ethiopian National Defense Forces in combating the rebel forces and the insurgents from Tigray. Why? Because in the history of Ethiopia, Amhara people have never declared any intention to secede. They are Ethiopia itself. They believe that Ethiopia should exist in eternity. They do not believe that they should be declaring Amhara People's Liberation Front. They are not asking to be liberated from anybody. And consequently, the politicians in Addis Ababa should stop fearing an armed and trained Amhara population, because Amharas have demonstrated by deeds in all the years that the Abyssinian Empire existed, the years that the Imperial Ethiopia existed, that they believe in the sustenance of the Ethiopian state as presently constituted forever. Consequently, the Amhara population who want to join ENDF efforts in Wollo should not be stopped, because they are not a threat to the Ethiopian state. Thank you.